Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 1 Corinthians, the 9th chapter. As it says here, Paul's use of liberty. Okay. And in here, Paul, goes through a series of points that he establishes. But all in all, the point that he's getting across here is, you have, because remember in the 8th chapter, he mentioned, like he went through an example of addressing having certain liberty and rights in the Yahweh Shai, but, spiritual maturity is really knowing when to exercise that and at what cost. Okay. Because having the right to do something, right, doesn't mean that you must do it. You gotta examine, what are the pros and cons of your behavior. And here in the 9th chapter, he sort of goes into that and exemplifies that, through him, right? And Barnabas and how they behaved to sort of solidify that point. He also addresses, because you had some Jake, man, you had some that were as we'll read, you'll see it, that were questioning his authority, right? So verse 9, Salakia, 1 Corinthians 9:1, it says, am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Yahweh Shai our Lord? Are not ye my work in the Lord? So, to those that are, making, either backbiting or talking or making it seem as though like, this Apostle Paul, he ain't one of the 12, he walking around here like he's on some some high level, but really, he's not Peter, he's not John, he's not James, so he's making the point like, yo, well, am I not an apostle? I'm also an apostle, right? Am I not also a free man? Have I not seen the Lord Yahweh Shai? Yeah, some might say, oh, you didn't walk with him while he was on the earth. That was the other apostles. But he's like, yeah, I saw him too. In fact, he came to me, right? And are you not my work? Or is it not due to my labor that, you were established? If I be not an apostle unto others, yet doubtless I am to you. For the seal of mine apostleship are ye in the Lord. Right? So even if others don't consider me an apostle, to you I most definitely am. And as a matter of fact, the proof of my apostleship are you. Okay, you being established is an example of that. You're all the way in Corinth. Okay. I came all the way from Antioch. I traveled all through here to establish you. Mine answer to them that do examine me is this: have we not power to eat and drink? And hear what he's saying, which I'll pull this up in the NLT. It puts it in better perspective. This is my answer to those who question my authority. Don't we have the right to live in your homes and share your meals? Have we not power to lead about a sister, a wife, as well as other apostles, and as the brethren of the Lord and Cephas? It says here, don't we have the right to bring a Christian wife with us, as the other apostles and the Lord's brothers do, and as Peter does? So we're apostles too. We could have done that. Or only I, or I only and Barnabas, have not we the power to forbear working? It says here in the NKJV, or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working? So he's saying, as apostles, don't we also have the right to be able to, come and stay with you and have you take care of us? Don't we have the right to bring a wife if we so please, like the other apostles do? When on our journeys with you, for you to take care of us? Or is it only Barnabas and I who don't have a right to stop working and be taken care of? We gotta work to keep earn our keep. Who goeth? So now he's using the example in relation to these examples in relation to his role, his job here, right? So who goeth a warfare at any time at his own charges, right? What soldiers go to war, at their expense? That's covered by the nation in which whose army they're fighting in. Who planteth a vineyard and eateth not of the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth a flock and eateth not of the milk of the flock? NLT, what soldier has to pay his own expenses? What farmer plants a vineyard and doesn't have the right to eat some of its fruit? What shepherd cares for a flock or sheep and isn't allowed to drink some of its milk? So, as he's saying here, and likening it onto, working, the him being an example of the soldier, right, or the planter, or the husbandman or the shepherd. Say I these things as a man, or saith not the law the same as well? So, are these things just me speaking my opinion? Is this not also in the law? For it is written in the law of Moses, thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. And what this is if you look up here, ox treading out the corn. So this is an example of a muzzle. It's something to cover the mouth of the ox. And sometimes they would have the ox that would walk, and they would either like actually walk on the threshing floor, and the pressure of their steps would help to thresh the husk off of the grain. But as they're walking, they would also eat some of the grain. Or as you can see this example, you might have a sled that is attached to them, and as they walk, it's dragging, on the ground. That's also an example of the threshing. But as the law says, they're allowed to eat some of the grain as they're doing this work. And Paul is saying here, well, that's what's in the law, right? You're not supposed to muzzle or shut up the mouth of the ox that's treading out the corn. Doth God take care for oxen? So, like, did God really have this law only for the ox because he cares so much about ox? Or saith he it altogether for our sakes? Was it not in consideration for us as well? For our sakes, no doubt, this is written. So the Apostle Paul is saying here, I'm making this connection and let you know, look, there's this law here, but it's not an application to only the oxen, right? It's also written for our sakes, because we can also be likened into this position of laboring. So we have a right to partake of our labors. It says here that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and that he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. So reading this in the NLT, wasn't he actually speaking to us? Yes, it was written for us, so that the one who plows and the one who threshes the grain might both expect a share of the harvest. If we have sown unto you spiritual things, is it a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things? So the sowing unto you spiritual things is the teaching you, right? The bringing you up, answering your questions, establishing you. That's sowing the spiritual things. So are we not allowed to reap your carnal things, to be expected for you to take care of us, to feed us, to house us? If others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather? So if others, because we have power over you as being your teachers and spiritual fathers, and if others have that power as well, should it not rather be us, above them all, since we established you? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things. And this is similar to what he told the church in Thessalonica, that the way they behaved themselves was in a way to be a good example to them, number one, but also to not burden them, so that the main focus can be on the gospel. See? So as he says here, nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things, lest we should hinder the gospel of Hamashiach. See? NLT, if you support others who preach to you, shouldn't we have an even greater right to be supported? But we have never used this right. We would rather put up with anything than be an obstacle to the good news about Hamashiach. See, so if we're coming to preach this good news onto you, we don't want anything to hinder that. right? We don't want you your to be a burden onto you to the point where now it's hindering, the gospel. Like, for example, imagine, you're teaching somebody, but you're living with them and you're being so burdensome to them that their mind is more occupied with their annoyance of your burden, or the taxing of your burden on them, than the joy of the gospel you're teaching them, hence hindering that gospel. And Paul said we didn't even want to run that risk. So we suffered all things, whatever we had to do to take care of ourselves, we did that. Even though we had the power to not. Do ye not know that they which minister about holy things live off the things of the temple? Referring to the priests, right? Those that serve in the temple, guess what? They live off the things of the temple. The money that goes to the temple, the things that are offered to the Lord, the shewbread, all of those things, that's what the priests live off of, right? The laborer is worthy of his hire. And they which wait at the altar are partakers with the altar, right? Those that do the sacrifice, guess what? They get to partake of the sacrifice, that is of the meat, or the grain that is offered. Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live off the gospel. Okay. In the same way, the Lord ordered that those who preach the good news should be supported by those who benefit from it. But I have used none of these things, neither have I written these things, that it should be so done unto me. Right. So he's saying, but I haven't exercised any of these rights. Okay. And I'm not writing this letter to you now to start doing this, for you to start treating us this way. For it were better for me to die than that any man should make my glorying void. So he said, I'd rather die than to have anybody be able to deny me this glorying of preaching, without basically preaching the gospel for free, right, onto you, right? Preaching the gospel without charge, as it says in the NLT. Yet I have never used any of these rights, and I am not writing this to suggest that I want to start now. In fact, I would rather die than lose my right to boast about preaching without charge. In other words, I'd rather die than to be a burden onto you, for somebody to be able to have the right to say, oh, no, no, no. When these guys came over here, they leached off of us. They laid on our couches and ate our food. And nah. For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. For necessity is laid upon me. Yea, woe unto me if I preach not the gospel. So he's saying, yeah, I preach the gospel, but this isn't something that I can just go about glorying about. This is something that I have to do. It's needful. There's a necessity that is upon me. I need to do this. I don't have a choice, right? Woe unto me, destruction unto me if I don't preach the gospel. For if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward. But if against my will, a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. And as it says here, let's look at some of these other translations. NLT, it says here, if I were doing this on my own initiative, I would deserve payment. But I have no choice, for God has given me this sacred trust. And we'll go into that word dispensation in a second. NIV, if I preach voluntarily, I have a reward. If not voluntarily, I am simply discharging the trust committed to me. Yeah, because, when you voluntarily do something, you are expecting something in return. But when you're doing something because you have to, it's not because you're expecting something in return. It's because you have no choice but to do it. Okay? For example, you go to the gym because you do that voluntarily because you want the gains, right? You want the way it looks. You go and help somebody move because, they're going to pay you, or, they asked you very nicely and you want to help them, right? Okay, you're going to get a reward out of doing it. When it comes to going to work and you got to pay bills, you're not doing that because you're voluntarily doing it for a reward. You're doing it because you need to do that. You don't really get a choice. You can't get up and say, well, I kind of felt like it, or I don't really feel. No, no, no. You're doing it because you have to do it. So like Paul is saying, when it comes to this ministry, if I was just getting up, oh, I just want to, I'm in a good mood, so I'm going to do this for you like a favor, and then you give me something in return. Okay, that would be one case. But he's saying, I'm doing this not because, it's not that I don't want to do this, but if I wanted to stop, I can't. So when you go into that word dispensation, it says, oikonomia, the management of a household or of household affairs. You see that? Specifically, the management, oversight, administration of others' property. So this position has been entrusted into him. This position of like the management of a household, which is likened onto Paul's position in the gospel, is committed onto him. So he doesn't have a choice. What is my reward then? Verily, that when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Hamashiach without charge, that I abuse not my power in the gospel. So in other words, then what then is my pay? It is the opportunity to preach the good news without charging anyone. That's why I never demand my rights when I preach the good news, meaning the exercising the right of an apostle or of his apostleship over, those that he set up. For though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more. Right? So even though I'm not in bondage under anyone, I took the role of a servant unto all so that I could gain them. Right? Not to be a lord over them, but to rather to help them and to serve them, so that I can gain them. Right? They can learn. They can grow under the right conditions or under the right environment. Verse 20, because it shows you Paul was I guess goal oriented, right? Like his whole mindset was on the importance of the task he is doing, right? Not about the glory that would come with it, or how others would see you, and the temporary benefits you could get while doing it. No, it was about what is the most effective and efficient way to get this done. And unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. So he basically, as he's going to say, became all things to all men. He spoke their language. NLT, when I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Hamashiach. Here's one example. If you go to the Jews, knowing how they are, living in a way contrary to them, before you can even get a chance to have an audience with them, they would have already rebuked you, shunned you, kicked you out, maybe try to stone you, right? So to first get them to even open up to listen, you got to come in a certain way, right? And that's what Paul did. So as he says here, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Hamashiach. When I was with those who followed the Jewish law, I too lived under that law. Even though I am not subject, even though I am not subject to the law, I did this so I could bring to Hamashiach those who are under the law. It's kind of like you have to go into somebody's house to bring them out of their house. Right? And when you go into their house, if they have a rule that you cannot, like, nobody wears shoes on a carpet, guess what? You got to take your shoes off before you go in the house. They have a rule that the second you get into the house, you got to wash your hands. That's the first thing you got to do when you go in there. They have a rule that nobody sits on that leather couch. Nobody sits on a leather couch. You got to stand. But you have to do these things while you're under their roof, and you have to be under their roof if you want to bring them out from that house to the Lord. See? So to put it in an example form, when he says, I became like these people, it's like I conformed to the way you live, so you would I would be able to make it into your house, so I can then teach you and bring you out to the Lord. Because if I came there to your house and I wasn't ready to take my shoes off, you wouldn't even let me into the house in the first place to be able to get those words into your ears. Verse 21, similar concept. To them that are without the law, as without law, being being not without law to God, but under the law to Hamashiach, that I might gain them that are without law. So, for example, we know that the Jews had no dealings with the, you know, with those they call the Gentiles, right? And this is even referring to Israelites that were in a Gentile state of mind. And those Gentiles, quote unquote, were living a certain kind of way. Paul is not saying here that, oh, well, if they were committing adultery, I went to commit adultery too, so I can get them. No, he's referring to, say they may not be doing the things that um the Jews would be doing when it comes to keeping certain laws and certain rights, you know, the way that they looked, the the way that they ate, not that they were eating, you know, in this case, Paul is not going to sit there and say, okay, I'm going to sit here and eat pork because you're eating pork. No, but he's referring to living similar to them so he can connect on common ground to those that were not under the law to be able to then bring them to Yahweh Shai. And he's saying, I wasn't without the law of God, but rather I was under the law of Yahweh Shai, that I might gain them that are without law. See, so I wasn't going out there being lawless and breaking the Heavenly Father's laws, but I was prioritizing the law of Yahweh Shai first. NLT, when I am with the Gentiles who do not follow the Jewish law, I too live apart from that law, so I can bring them to Hamashiach. But I do not ignore the law of God, I obey the law of Hamashiach. To the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. See? So as he's saying here, you know, to those that were weak, I became weak. In other words, I found common ground, means in which I could connect, spread the word, and save some, get the word to them. And those that were believers, that were the elect of them, would hear it and come out of that. And this I do for the gospel's sake. So I did all this for the sake of Yahweh Shai's gospel, that I might be made partaker thereof with you. See? So as he says, I did this for the gospel, so I can also partake of the benefits. NLT, I do everything to spread the good news and share in its blessings. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? So just like when you run a race, not everybody comes in first place. Only one person can come in first place. So run that ye may obtain. So and when he likens the journey in this ministry to running a race. So you got to run with the intention of winning. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. So all those that are, you know, whether it's athletes or whatever it is that they are involved in, those that are trying to be champions, that are trying to come in first place, that are trying to, you know, achieve the top position, they're temperate, they're disciplined. Okay. In all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, whether it's a trophy, whether it's the first place medal, whether it's the world record holder of whatever it is they do. They're doing it for something corruptible, because they were athletes during Paul's time. How many of them do you know now? Because their crowns they received, it was corruptible. But we an incorruptible. Guess what? We still know Paul till today. We know Moses till today. We know Abraham. Shit, we even know Adam. Going back to the beginning. What about all those that were, you know, during that time that were famous for certain things? We don't know them. So we're doing this for an incorruptible crown. That's the glory the Lord is going to give us, one that never ceaseth or perisheth. So how much more for us? If those that are doing it for an incorruptible crown are disciplined in doing it, how much more for us? I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beateth the air. Okay, so he's basically saying, like, I run with intent, I run with purpose in this race. Not just I'm just out here doing it, just going through the motions. No. And I'm in this ministry, which is also likened onto a fight. He's saying I fight, not like, you know, I'm just shadow boxing. I'm fighting like I'm in a real fight. But I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, right? So he disciplines himself. And when you bring your body into subjection, you make it submit to do what you want it to do, not the other way around, not being ruled by your flesh. And Paul is saying he does that for the sake, right, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. So I'm doing this so that I don't end up having taught others, but due to lack of discipline or lack of running with intent to complete this race, I've taught others, but I myself am not able to make it. And that brings us to the end of the book of 1 Corinthians, the 9th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.